Let's talk about our hopes and dreams, beyond the reach it seems. Let's talk, confess I live in hell, I failed to fall in scheme. Maybe we can find a pathway forward or a clue. So we may together be a symbiotic harmony, where I can talk to you, you can talk to me. Let's talk, let's talk. Let's talk, let's talk, let's talk.
Hello, and welcome to the Talk Vermont. We are entering our 8th season of programming. This is a program, a monthly program that addresses the issues, concerns, and interests of Black and marginalized communities here in Vermont, but it's not just for the wider community of Vermont, but it's also for anyone else who is interested in the topics that we address, because we're hoping that you'll not only get to know a little bit about what's going on here in Vermont, but also realize that the concerns and interests that we have are concerns that are shared by people throughout the country and throughout the world. My first 2 programs, in other words, the first Tuesday of January, which is today, and the first Tuesday of February, which will commemorate Black History Month, will be devoted to issues that I hope you will be interested in. But we are inviting friends of mine from outside the state to talk about matters that I hope will be of interest to you within this state. And so I've invited 3 good friends of mine, the artistic director of Theater of the Oppressed Uptown in New York City, which is a program of Riverside Church in Harlem, New York, where I was privileged to serve for several years before returning to Vermont. We'll talk with the director of that program. His name is Jeremiah Drake, and we'll also talk with 2 other members, volunteers within that program. 2 individuals, by the way, which I had the privilege of officiating their wedding. They are Derek and Karen Lou Bainia-Misa. So we're going to first talk about Theater of the Oppressed, and then we're going to get to know the individuals behind it. And thirdly, we're going to see if you have questions that you'd like to ask of these august individuals that I've brought live on this program. So let's begin with you, Jeremiah. Tell us about Theater of the Oppressed, how it came into being, and how it became a program of the Riverside Church.
Well, Theater of the Oppressed was developed officially back in the 1970s, early 70s, by a theater activist from Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, a person who I worked with. He was my mentor for several years, Augusto Boal. And he, as I said, was a theater professional. And well, one night he was, because of his activities, he was disappeared by the military junta. He was snatched up off of the street while leaving a play, just as people are being snatched up now by ICE. So he was disappeared and taken to a police station and tortured for 3 months. And it's interesting too, because Augusto said, well, why? He spoke to his torturer. He said, why are you torturing me? I've done nothing to you. And the torturer said, hey, look, it's nothing personal. I'm just doing my job, all right? I don't know why I'm torturing you. That's not my job, okay? And so he persisted while hanging on something called the parrot's perch, which you're manacled and you're upside down and you're naked. Torture is always done naked. And so, but anyway, he was tortured and he spoke to the torturer. And so the torturer had enough of his asking questions. So he went in the next room and got a piece of paper and it said, You, Augusto Boal, are being tortured because you travel around the world defaming Brazil by saying there's torture here. And the guy didn't even realize the fallacy in his statement because, yeah, there was indeed torture in Brazil. But what he did after that, he was kicked out, well, he was banished from Brazil. And he first went to Peru, where he worked with Paulo Freire in a literacy program. And that's where he uh, created the homage to Paulo's book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And so he developed Theater of the Oppressed, where you teach theater to the oppressed, because the basic aim of the theater of the oppressed is to humanize humanity. The theater of the oppressed is a system of exercises, games, and techniques based on the essential theater. And that's so amazing to me, the essential theater that we all have within. We're all doing theater now. You know, it's a spiritual relationship because every human being is capable of seeing the situation and seeing himself or herself in the situation, right? Which makes us actor and spectator within the same person. And every human being is capable of acting. To survive, we necessarily have to produce actions and observe those actions and their effects upon the environment. We do it all the time. It's essential. We cannot help but do it. To be human is to be theater, is to be the coexistence of actor and spectator in the same individual. This is subjective theater. But when human beings limit themselves to observing an object, a person, or a space, renouncing momentarily to the capacity and necessity of acting, the energy and their desire to act is transferred to that space, person, or object, creating a space within a space, an aesthetic space. This is the objective space. Now, one more point. All human beings use in their daily lives the same language that actors use on stage. Their voices, their bodies, their movements, and their expressions. They translate their emotions and desires into the theatrical language. And that's what we're speaking now. We can't help it. And do I have time to make one more point?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, well, I was working with a theater company in Chicago called the Imagination Theater. It was known as the oldest children's theater company in Chicago. And so my fellow actors, we were paid. We were paid to have an early morning call, and we'd go to various junior high schools or high schools in the Chicago area. And so, and we did plays on drug and alcohol prevention, abuse prevention, date rape, and child abuse prevention. And we worked with the Chicago Police Department and worked with psychiatrists. They need to check this all out because some of the issues we worked with were quite serious. So, but our general manager, we had a party, and he brought a book to the party, and it said Theater of the Oppressed. And I was transfixed by the title, Theater of the Oppressed. I said, what is this? What is this? This is in 95. And Augusto was on the cover, and he was in a very expressive pose. And I said, I got to get the book. So we started experimenting with the techniques. And so something happened. It turned out our general manager, he had an addiction problem. We didn't know it. And he started screwing the money up and everything. So all the other actors quit. I refused to quit. I said, our work is too important. Plus, I had another job managing the arts building called the Flatiron Arts Building in Chicago. It's an artist colony, and now it's still going strong. But so they all left. I'm the only one in the office. phones ringing off the hook, principals calling, where are my actors? I paid you all. I've got 400 kids in the auditorium. Where are you? And so I said, gee, so I canceled a whole month of shows. I picked Augusto's books up and I pounded enough of forum theater in my head, theater as a question, what would you do? Which is basically the technique used by that TV show with John, what's his name? John Cajones. And it's called What Would You Do? It's pure forum theater. And so I did enough of that to go into a school called the Gage Park High School. And the guidance counselor who hired me said, I don't know what you're gonna do. We heard all the kids and they're really 95, it was off the chain. And so she said, I don't know what you're gonna do, but please remember, we have 6 blind Asian students. All they do is sit in the back. They never participate. See if you can engage with them. And then she ran off maybe to the nearest bar to get a shot of a Jägermeister. She was so harried because the schools were, you know, like I said, off the chain back then. And so I remembered what she said, remember the blind students. And so during the play, I had to do some kind of improvisational theater on the bullying in the cafeteria. Oppression. Bullying is oppression.
Yeah.
You know, it's domination. And so I set up a table on a stage and some chairs around it. And I said, this is our cafeteria, a space within a space. And so this is like, I got some kids out of the audience and they're goofing off and I really couldn't get directorial control, Joker control. And so I said I didn't know what to do. So when something like that, you just create, you improvise. So I said, you in the back, in the corner, where they were sitting, the blind Asian students, 6, only 6, whole school was black. And so here comes this brave student, blind Asian student. He must have been, he's a student, wonderful student, young student. He comes down and with his cane, and I help him on stage and he gets into position with the other kids around the table in our cafeteria in the auditorium on the stage. And so the other kids are putting their hands in his face, you know, and laughing, and the audience is laughing. And at one point, this young man stood up and slid his chair away from the other students, stood up on the chair. I couldn't get to him in time. I would have discouraged him from doing that, even though he wasn't completely disabled. He was differently able. He may have even rehearsed it, and so at home. But this became an opportunity for him to tell his truth. And so he stood up on the chair and started, stroking his or, poking his cane up into the air. And he said, why do you people do this to you? Why do you put stuff in our way? Why do you try to trip us? And he wouldn't stop. And he got to the point where tears were starting to well up in his eyes. And he said, our canes allow us to see. Why do you do it? And he was persistent. Now, the kids are laughing and all of that, throwing stuff at us on stage. But the cool kids up front said, wait a minute, this is out of the ordinary. My God, he made a spectacle of himself. He became spectacular. And the sighted students saw the blind students for the first time. He said, we are human beings. We are people like you. What are you talking about, black, white, yellow? We don't see that. And so the cool kids up front silenced the entire auditorium. Shut up, shut up. And it was completely silent. And all you heard was that young man. Why do you do it? We are human beings. Our canes allow us to see. And some kid in the back did this. And everyone broke out in applause. And I said, this is the type of theater I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And I've been doing it. It's been just something that's been my life. We are all theater. And now I do theater of, with, and for, and by the oppressed, because I too am oppressed. We all are. So that was my transformational moment. And I've been doing it ever since. And I believe the relationship between the sighted and the blind students would change. And I imagine some young man, maybe the guy or gal who applauded in the back, maybe they went to him the next day and said, hey, my name is Jill, or my name is James. And that's the beginning of change.
We should we should also let viewers know that if you as viewers Wikipedia Theater of the Oppressed, you'll find photos of Augusto Boal and the residents around Upper Manhattan gathering at Riverside Church. I think it was back in 2007, 2008. And Wikipedia will talk about Theater of the Oppressed, will define Theater of the Oppressed, and focus upon what Jeremiah and his troupe were doing in gathering interested folk in the Manhattan and I guess wider New York City area. So, so I hope you will do that. Karen, Derek, other good friends of mine, tell us why you became involved with Theater of the Oppressed.
Sure, I can start. Hello, everyone. Great to be here. I was first introduced to Theater of the Oppressed really through Jeremiah and his ministry, and I don't come from a theater background. So anything to do with this type of expression, I was very intimidated. But I also learned how freeing it was through the work with Jeremiah in Theater of the Oppressed. I quickly realized that it wasn't about performing perfectly. It was about showing up, participating, and engaging with others in ways that are honest and embodied. In Jeremiah, I remember the first few sessions, he led us through what we call these games in TO to build theatrical communion. I remember Jeremiah sharing that with us. And these games that we play in TO are not just warm-ups, but they were really core to the practice. They build trust and presence and connection. And as Jeremiah often reminds us, don't think too much, just do. And that always kind of resonates with me because I feel like sometimes I overthink too much. And that advice is so powerful because it reminds me that sometimes learning and communication happens in the body and through action, even before we put it into words.
Yeah.
That's something that resonates with me.
Derek.
Yeah. I was right there with Karen when we both went into it. I can only add, my story's similar. I would say that don't think, do, but the other piece is always after you do to reflect and unpack and see what's there. So it was also to explore yourself, but also to explore the overall situation, who you were in that situation, who other people were in that situation, and just to see what was possible, So we'd known Jeremiah as members of Riverside Church, and for a while before we did TO. And always kind of found him to be interesting and very animated. And when we had a chance to kind of go and sit in on the first class we did with him, or the first session, we went, and it was really what Karen described. We did create theatrical community, but what I felt in my first time doing it was that just the freedom to express myself and to give other people space to express themselves. And it just became this elastic space where you could explore not only what is, but what might be in a playful way. But I did find over time that gave me sort of permission to do that in other spaces. So I started to refer to Theater of the Oppressed as a bit of a social and a spiritual gym, which is kind of interesting. It added something to the church. I always think of church as a spiritual gym too. So it was interesting to be able to go to church and then also put some of what we see in the pulpit into practice in the theater, and then go on and kind of see how that could impact you in life, so, yeah.
Well, I have a question. You may not know this, but I tend to be very much of an introvert. And so it would be difficult for me to go into a program that has theater attached to it, because it means that somehow I need to feel comfortable and express myself in ways in public, in ways that I may feel very uncomfortable doing. So how do you warm up individuals who are there for the first time to actually open up in that sort of way?
Right. Well, it's been mentioned of the theatrical communion, and so there are various exercises we do. Some people call it breaking the ice or whatever, but ours is not just telling a funny joke or something like that. It's getting people to do theater in a sense, and games are a form of theater. Games and exercises. Bawal called them gamesercises. And so, there's a widely used TO technique that's done all over the world. And when Augusto was at the church, he said, it's so simple, we're almost embarrassed by it. And he had everyone stay seated, and he said, everyone take your right hand, make a circle, and do that for a couple of seconds, put that down, take your left hand and make a continuous cross. So you make the continuous circle, and you make the continuous cross. And it's amazing how when you have people make the circle and the cross, or the cross and the circle, how sometimes there's this eruption of laughter that comes out because it's discombobulating to do two things at once unless you practice it like a pianist. And sometimes they'll do it, they're using pedals, so they do four things at once. So we do the cross and the circle, and then we move on to other exercises, like complete the image. Start with a frozen image with two volunteers in the guise of spectators who act. We have them start with a handshake, and then one person is tapped, that person moves out. And then there's another person standing there, a frozen, say, image, a frozen image, tableau vivant, it's frozen there. And then that person on the outside has to go back into the image and complete it by making something new. And they go in without thinking, because once you start thinking, you turn on that cerebral part of the brain that says, no, not this, not that. And so you just go in and you just create. Like Pablo Picasso said, I do not seek, I find. Mm-hmm. And to me, that it took a long time. When I first heard that, I go, what is he talking about? I don't seek, I find. But it's using a part of your brain that most often we do not really connect to, that inner creative space where it's beyond language, it's even beyond culture, it's even beyond it's time and space. It's weird. You just go in. And also, when that person comes out, and I've just realized this a few years ago, that person who is out is in a state of superposition. They're out, but yet they're in, and they're going to go back in and create a new reality of that image. So when that person is in this metaxis, the liminal space of the outside, prepared to create something new, they are indeed in a state of superposition. Mm-hmm. Neither there nor there, but here and there. It's interesting. It's an interesting concept. And so after that, and then you get to the core of the issue. Because when we do TO, we don't go in with a set script, unless it's a play that we put together. But then within that play, there's opportunities for change in the script. Most plays, and this is why I got out of that type of theater where you create a fourth wall by imagining your living room in front of you, your living room at home. And what you do is you deactivate the audience. I don't like that. And you're trying your best to ignore them. And so we collapse that fourth wall, and the stage becomes the aesthetic space, becomes the laboratory of the oppressed.
So when you say, before you go on, Jeremiah, a lot of people may not know what you mean by fourth wall.
I'm sorry. Yeah, the fourth wall is the invisible barrier in front of, at the proscenium arch, the front of the stage, front of the stage, the proscenium arch, where the actors create an imaginary wall And you do that technically, like right now, I'm looking at my stove. I see the coffee pot, I see another pot, I see the light, the cupboards. I would take that on stage in my creative imagination, in my memory. Because you can have no imagination without memory, and you can't have a memory without imagination. So you use that imaginary wall on stage in your mind, trying to cancel out the reality of the audience. And the audience is told you can laugh when you're supposed to laugh, you can cry when you're supposed to cry, but other than that, you keep your mouth shut. I don't like that type of theater. And someone told me, they said, well, collapsing the fourth wall, that's a gimmick. But what's the protagonic gimmick? What's the real gimmick is when you have a room full of people, yet you're trying to put up this invisible barrier between yourself and them. And
So
so
the audience, in effect, becomes part of the production. I
yeah,
this-
well, the audience in
it's-
that type of theater is oppressed. They don't have a voice. They sit there quiet, watching the script, watching the theater on stage. That is called conventional theater, or also objective theater, where you're looking at the object of the stage. And the actors are trying not to look at you. You never look at your audience. You ever see that TV show? What's the TV show with the high school? Something High, with the young African-American teacher and the kid that used to play. Well, anyway, Something High. Anyway, they look directly into the lens in that TV show. They look direct, and that's breaking the fourth wall.
Yeah.
You're acknowledging that there is an audience out there. And I've done camera acting where your last thing you want to do is look in the camera, because you're breaking the fourth wall, camera-wise. And so
Okay.
we do that in the theater of the oppressed. We allow the oppressed people to come into the creative space
And okay,
and reverse reality.
okay, and so my next question is that, and this is where Karen and Derek, if I'd like to get your impressions as well. The Riverside Church is kind of on the borders of Upper West Manhattan and Harlem. Actually, it's basically in Harlem. It's for the most part, my impressions is a middle class, upper middle class, interracial, intercultural community. Big church, situated in Harlem. My question is, does Harlem come to you when to address some of the problems, or does the theater go to Harlem and other parts to address the problems that the people in that community face? And so that's one question. And the second question is, what are the major issues that TO finds itself addressing in the New York area?
Let me see if I can speak to the first one. In my experience of TO at Riverside Church, we've had, you don't know who's going to come into a class. It could be people visiting from other parts of the country. It could be someone who has recently come out of jail. It could be somebody who was curious about the church and decided to check in. So it's very much an open space for the community to come to. We have planned a type of theater that involves going out into public spaces and creating challenging conversations and getting people to kind of question things. Jeremiah is quite experienced in doing that, and I guess his work actually at the Bowery Mission is also an example of that, taking theater of the oppressed out into the world. But as you might gather from what Jeremiah said about the fourth wall, breaking it by empowering the audience there's this act of inclusion that the audience is never just an audience. The audience is part of the moment, part of the scene, and people are encouraged and empowered to participate. So it could be anywhere, and that's what it's. And that's why I think having the theater at Riverside Church actually expands the church in a way, because there are people who just go for worship, and they kind of come, they get that, and then they go, or they stay in the church, and they don't necessarily interact with other types of people. But that space in the church brings other people into it for their own reasons and with their own stories, and so it's got a two-way sort of accessibility to it. So just hopefully that answers the question to some.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Well, sure does.
Karen, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would add too. I mean, TO provides this space, just building on what Derek was saying, that it allows for all this interaction. Like the hierarchies between actor and audience are broken down. There are no hierarchies. And, you know, as what Jeremiah was saying, that everyone is a spectator, both observing and participating. And so there's these different ways of entry points, which I say it's such an inclusive space. So within the church and like outside of the church. And just, you know, Riverside Church is a very large church. So sometimes it could be hard to have this small church community, but TO is actually that space where people can drop in and drop off anytime. And it's such an inclusive and open space where it does have that small church feel within the TO ministry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's play. Yeah, it's play.
So what are some
Yes,
of the
it's play.
So what are some of the issues that you find yourself as members of TO? When I say TO viewers, it means Theater of the Oppressed. What are some of the issues that you find yourself grappling with in the work that you do?
So I think that isolation, personal space, issues of power, issues of sort of notions of property. So, you know, things like real estate and the cost of living are really, you know, Karen and I, as an interracial couple, have done a number of sort of exercises around navigating how people perceive us in different contexts. You know, her as an Asian American woman and me as an African American male, and the idea of us together and how different people respond to us. We've workshopped that, you know. So these are sort of issues that are deeper, that resonate with people who live in large urban centers like New York. And, you know, we get to take a step back and focus on that. Like, we don't talk about those kinds of things every day, but you can like zero in on it at TO and also connect with how that situates you in your larger environment. And it could go as broad as, I mean, we've done a lot of workshops that speak to the idea of a Trump presidency and how that's showing up in the world. We've done work that's dealt with the concept of war, you know, either on a large scale or how people experience it every day. We've done exercises that have shown an uncanny link to things going on in other parts of the world, like Christ in the rubble, you know, talking about a baby in Palestine. There are things that we have been doing for years that had dealt with as kind of considerations and how you respond to some of the things going on in the world in a way that maybe even prepare you for when you see it in the world to a certain degree. So, yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add to that, what's been said?
Yeah, I would add too that TO, as I believe Derek said, can be done anywhere. You know, you don't need a stage, a traditional stage. You don't need the box office. You don't need the stage manager. All that's the business of theater. because that type of theater, if it doesn't make money, it's not going to be around for a long time. And it requires a lot of money just to get the playwright, to write the script. It takes a lot of money. But TO, I've done it and anywhere. It's now I'm doing it at the Bowery Rescue Mission. I cover the Wednesday chapel. Now, people might find it weird that a theater artist is in basically a church with a Wednesday chapel doing theater with the street homeless. But it's not, I brought one of the reverends down from the church to the Bowery Mission. And I said, Leah, Reverend Leah, I don't preach Jesus necessarily, all right? I preach art and the inner transformational power of creative activity, the conscientization, the elevation of consciousness. To me, consciousness is the soul. I never interact with my soul, but I interact with my consciousness all the time. And I believe the soul is our consciousness, and because when we're unconscious, we're not aware of anything. So, or when we're anesthetized. But theater can be done anywhere, and I've done it with countless topics and issues.
Well, tell us about the Bowery. You mentioned the Bowery Mission.
The Bowery Rescue Mission. Well, back in 2014, Jason Storbach, and he's now a Mennonite minister. And so I met him at Union Theological Seminary, maybe in 2005, 6, he and his wonderful wife and kids. And so I went down to the Bowery in 2014, but it wasn't a good time. For me, it wasn't the Kairos moment. It wasn't the opportune time, which I've done a lot of work on that issue too. The opportune moment, So it wasn't a good time, and they had pews lined up all in where the stage is. Well, it's a small low rise, and it's very intimate with street homeless. But before, it was very regimented. When you are forced to look in one direction, sitting in a rigid chair or stage or theater space, and everyone is forced to look, boom, right there at that stage. It's inhibiting. But now they got rid of the pews, they have a wide open area, and every Wednesday we get about 100, 120 street homeless, and some of the people aren't homeless, they're just hungry. I was interacting with a lawyer down there, and he spoke to me and Reverend Leah, and he said, Jeremiah, I have a question. I want to say something to you. I said, sure. He says, I need a job. Can you help me? And so, of course, like Bawal said, Augusto said, if I can help someone, I help. I'm sorry. If I can help, I help. So I said, sure. So I linked him to one of our participants. Derek and Karen know her well. Her name is Laura Lewis. I should have had her on this program. I don't know what I was thinking. Boy.
There'll be other opportunities.
Yeah, that'll be another one. But Laura is a former New York State Supreme Court judge. And so she is, just a wonderful addition to the theater of the oppressed of the Riverside Church, and is really helping her in so many ways. So, but the lawyer said, I need a job. So I linked him to Laura, and his name is Mark. He'll be at our next workshop on the 24th of this month. And we're going to see what we can do to help him, because I go down there to help you. And a nice woman, nice preacher and everything, but Jason, who runs these, a Mennonite minister, runs the chapel. And when I came in that Wednesday, he said, she's going to be here, but she's too harsh. It was that fire and brimstone religion, sinners. And he said, they're already down. They don't need that. And I said, yeah, we need to give them the good news of creativity and art, and consciousness elevation. That's what it's all about. That's what Jesus was about. Jesus was an artist. He healed the blind man with clay. He spat in the dust and he made clay. He put it on the person's eyes, you know, and the person saw. Okay, now myth, whatever, I don't know. But I say he was an artist when he did, most of his work was theatrical. You know, when he rode in on a donkey calf into the city, a king on a donkey, a baby donkey. Give me a break, that's theater. It is wonderful. And you may know him, Peter Heltzo. He wrote in his book, Jazz Improvisation, he said, all churches are theaters of the oppressed. And that's what Augusto said. All churches should have theater of the oppressed.
That's a challenging message to churches because many of them don't see them as that. They tend to be products of the affluent members, and so we got to hear that message more often. For you who are viewing this program, if you wish to ask questions of Jeremiah or Karen or Derek, feel free to call in. The number is 802-862-3966. In the meantime, I have a few more questions to ask. How might a theater of the oppressed be started in a place like Vermont?
Well, I was thinking about that question, and because it doesn't require all of the super expensive accoutrements of traditional or of conventional theater with the stage and the proscenium arch and all that in the box office, it doesn't require any of that. When I first started doing TO in Chicago, I had my little cart and I would go to all the high schools, and after that first experience at Gage Park with the blind students, so I'd go to the high schools and everything, and I would you go onto the stage or wherever, and I'd find stuff that was just sitting around, and I'd use that for my props, and because it's keeping with the principles of theater of the oppressed, because the oppressed people, they don't have the resources to go to some fancy prop store. But why bother? You can use what we consider junk, or just stuff that we're not using, like a table or a chair that's in the back, or an old dresser, or some schools you'll see like a big chair that looks like a throne. I'll use all of that. And plus I have my own little junk that I use to set the stage. So all it takes to start a theater of the oppressed there is to do it somewhere. Because just like Augusto, when he did theater of the oppressed at Harvard, he said, I'm trying to seduce you to do theater outside the walls of this institution. I'm trying to seduce you, meaning when most people, when they see theater of the oppressed, some people will say, oh, that's pretty cool. But some people will have that aha moment. There's always that moment. That's a spark of a passion. It says, wow. Like when I saw the blind student have the opportunity to express himself. And I'm pretty sure he may have rehearsed that at home. But at the time, I didn't know. I wasn't aware of it. I didn't think of it. But all it takes is a space and an assemblage of people. Now, most people, when they hear the term, there's going to be a theater of the oppressed event show, most people will come because they say, yeah, I get it. I mean, it has to be that way with anything that grows. And you can bet there are people in Vermont who would probably say, yeah, I could use that to know that I am an actor. I'm an artist. I'm a creator. That's what I take down to the Bowery. You're not just a bum. And I've done this work with the city of New York and the HRA offices, human resources offices with Gage Park and our good friend Karen Diggs. And that is amazing, working with people who are considered welfare recipients. We throw that away. You are not a welfare recipient. You are an individual, you're a creator, you're an artist. If you want to say it, you're a child of God, and we insist upon that. And we respect the native intelligence of all people. Because after all, like Paulo Freire says in Pedagogy of the Oppressed, I might be able to teach a peasant how to spell plow. The peasant can teach me how to use the plow. There are no such thing as ignorant people. All people have their own level or own state of intelligence. And it has to be protected and respected. But I'm curious. Let's see what we can do. Let's go up there and find a place where we can do it, even if it's outside in a park. It doesn't require any of that. So yeah, let's try it sometime.
Well, I'm hoping that there are listeners who will consider your offer, because Vermont is a rather creative sort of place where artists like to come to either rejuvenate themselves, experiment with all sorts of things. And I'm hoping that some of them are probably watching this program and will be in touch with you.
I hope so. Because, when you mention artists, theater of the oppressed, theater includes all of the arts, right? When you go to a show, even on Broadway, it's visual art, right? Stage setting. It's musical. It can be if it's a musical, but even the actions can be musical. But it's visual, it's musical, it's literary. You have the script, it's lighting, it's everything. It's all of the arts. And also, his last book was called Pedagogy of the Oppressed. That's my voting thing from a couple of years ago.
Okay.
Aesthetics of the Oppressed. The aesthetics of the oppressed. Aesthetics meaning the information we gain through our senses. The oppressed, sometimes the oppressed can be dulled by all of the imperatives of society. Do this, do that. And it sort of creates calluses on your creative neurons. That's what extreme indoctrination does. And it happened to me on Army paratroops. I wanted to heal people. Next thing you know, I woke up and I wanted to kill. I got sad. I'm like, what happened to me? But it was the extreme indoctrination of the military mindset. That happens in society too. So, but the arts can help free that up. And we use one of the pieces I made, I call them geofixes. And this particular geofix addressed the oppression, the earth experience. Mother Earth is, as Pope Francis said, Mother Earth is among the most oppressed of them all. I'm paraphrasing somewhat, but he said the earth is oppressed, is among the most oppressed, the planet Earth. And it is. We're oppressing that, the species known as the Homo sapiens. So it's, to me, it's something that people will see it and they'll connect to it because, as I said, we are all theater. And the basic aim is to humanize humanity. And I think that's something that a lot of people would like to do through arts practice and theater. And, so yeah, let's see what we can do. I'm coming up sometime.
Okay. I'll extend an invitation to all three of you, in fact.
Yes, indeed. They have to be there.
I would, well,
Go ahead, Derek.
I would add to what Jeremiah said that starting Theater of the Oppressed, I think there's so many layers to it. There's an intellectual layer. There's a body of thinking that's in aesthetics of the oppressed, pedagogy of the oppressed, theater of the oppressed. But the best way to do it is just to go someplace where it's being practiced and experience it for yourself, because it makes such a deep impression. And to keep doing it with the idea that you're not just present to participate passively. Once you understand that, it's something that can be replicated in community pretty easily. So sure. I think that that's how we got involved, And Karen, I don't know if you want to kind of chime in on that front. And so, yeah, I would say that just to go somewhere where it's being practiced and experience it in community and see if you want to take it forward.
Okay. Now, you and Derek, you and Karen, and to some extent, I'm gonna turn back to you, Jeremiah. But first, both you, Karen, and Derek, you're both involved in education as well as arts. Tell us a little bit about what you do outside of theater.
Okay, go ahead, Karen.
Sure. So my background is in community education, primarily focused in out-of-school learning experiences. So I do a lot of education that complements formal education in classrooms. So for example, I've done a lot of my teaching in museums, public parks, and after-school programs. So that's sort of my background, really sort of having students, particularly young people, seeing the assets in their community wherever they are. So that's really where my interest is in site-based, place-based education. And so, and just kind of looping it back to theater press is that another reason why I was drawn to TO is because what Jeremiah had said, as an educator, I was familiar with Paulo Freire's pedagogy of the press. And TO feels like a living, breathing extension of those ideas. So Freire talks about, breaking down the walls between student and teacher, creating dialogue, fostering critical consciousness. And TO, we do very similar practices. And like what's been shared, it really is this rehearsal for life.
That's what it is.
Yep.
Great. Thank
Yes,
you, Karen.
very well said, Karen and Derek. And Arnold, to continue answering your question, how might TO be brought to Vermont? All I need is the name of a local college. I will connect with someone there, and we will go to a college and do it there. And we'll even bring up that torpedo you and I went down to the village and picked up a long time ago. I still have the skeleton of the torpedo, and I want to finish it off. But Arnold and I traveled down to the village, Greenwich Village, and this was part of I wanted to take a tank, a real military tank, and turn it into plowshares, anything that cuts the earth. So, and I called Fort Dix, where I took basic, and I spoke to the range officer. He's the guy that directs all the fire in the fire zones, and they destroy the tanks. They let the young soldiers destroy the tanks. And so, and I did that too with the light weapon. It's called the LAW, light anti-tank weapon. But so I called him and I said, hey, I'm looking for a tank. Do you have a tank I could have? And he said, hey, I'll give you a tank. You'll have to move it. And it will be a shot up tank. And I said, well, I'm never going to use it. So we used that grant we got from Citgo of Venezuela. That's, the money came from Venezuela, the oil company. And so we used that grant to go down. Instead of getting a tank, we went into the village and got a torpedo. And it was so funny. We were loading the torpedo in the back of a Riverside Church SUV that said Riverside Church on the side. And people were loading grenades, duds, of course, a torpedo, bullets, gas cans. And people are like, what is going on at Riverside Church? Well, I turned it into torpedoes into plowshares. And we harvested some of the metal and turned it into hand shovels. And a group of us went across the street to Grant's tomb and planted flowers in the rear. And so, but that's a part of theater of the oppressed. Always being creative, using the metaphoric nature. We are metaphoric. Human beings are meant to transform one form of reality into another. And some people, think that, well, we know that some elephants, some dolphins they see themselves, they see the other. So they have that metaphoric ability. But human beings are the only creature who are truly metaphoric. We can take a hut and imagine it as a five-star hotel. And so we can transform reality. That's not really, appreciated by the extremists of the world. They just want us to follow orders. You do what I say. Your problem is you think too much. But so the torpedo was the effort to create metaphor. And you can take a torpedo, you can turn it into plowshares. And it was part of a major event in the nave of the church called the Armed Man. It was a big symphony orchestra, and the torpedo stayed on a table in the narthex, out, the lobby of the nave, the sanctuary. And so, yeah, so I look forward to learning from the people of Vermont, because in TO, we don't believe that we have all the answers.
Right.
We, like in pedagogy of the oppressed, we have a teacher student, the teacher becomes a student, and the student becomes the teacher. And to me, that's a dialogue. And that's what human relations should be one of dialogue, not monologue.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank all three of you, Derek and Karen and Jeremiah, for being a part of this first session of the new year of the Talk Vermont, and we will most likely be in touch with you in the future. And this is a program that's aired live but also recorded, so those who could not view it will have an opportunity to see it later on. And hopefully, if they wish to be in touch with you, they will most likely call me or contact me or the studio, and we will extend the invitation to you to come up and join us and help us bring TO to Vermont. Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Maybe we'll do something in the studio.
I hope so. I hope so. For those of you who are viewing, I want to let you know that our next production will feature another theater from Harlem, Shades of Truth. And they're going to present a program online to us here in Vermont called Mothers of the Movement, which really focuses upon the women who were involved in the civil rights movement here in the United States, the power behind the throne, you might say, and some in front of the throne, and those who were involved in human rights movements in other parts of the world. So we hope that you'll tune in to that production, which will be the first Tuesday in February. In the meantime, be brave, be blessed, and be kind. I'll see you next time. Thank you so much.
Let's talk about our hopes and dreams. Beyond the reach it seems. Let's talk. Confess I live in hell. I failed to fall this game. Maybe we can find a pathway forward or a clue. So we may together be a symbiotic harmony where I can talk to you, you can talk to me. Let's talk. Let's talk. Let's talk. Let's talk. Let's talk.
Can you hear me?